One of the most important and shocking events of the 1960s is the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. On November 22, 1963, President Kennedy was riding in an open-top convertible through large crowds gathered along the parade route in Dallas, Texas. As the vehicle passed the Texas School Book Depository building, Lee Harvey Oswald fired 3 shots from the 6th floor, fatally wounding the President John F. Kennedy. The assassination of the president was very controversial and started many conspiracies. Many questioned authorities regarding the location of where the bullets were from and who actually was behind this tragic assassination. This belief began when bystanders swore they heard the shots being fired from the grassy knoll. Also, many questioned Oswald's ability to fire 3 shots in only 6 seconds and the truthfulness and intentions of the FBI. Because of this, people became obsessed with the convincing conspiracies. The assassination of JFK became the most talked about conspiracy theory of all time, and engulfed the decade in stress and tragedy as many wondered what the 60s would be like if John F. Kennedy was able to finish out his time as president. This devastating event greatly affected the United States because there is a definite possibility that if JFK were to have stayed president, that he would have pulled out U.S. troops from Vietnam, as Vietnam negatively impacted the U.S. with many deaths and feeding protests. On June 17, 1972, 5 burglars broke into the Democratic National Committee headquarters in Washington, setting off a series of actions that eventually brought down the Republican President Richard Nixon. When the break-in first occurred, officials connected the burglars to the Committee for the Re-election of the President. Washington Post journalist had an anonymous informant named Deep Throat that told the journalist to follow the money trail of the burglars, which eventually led them to Creep. Former employees of Nixon's election committee told investigators that Nixon was definitely involved in the cover-up. After many requests by investigators to receive the tape recordings of all conversation in the Oval Office, Nixon finally handed it over. Officials discovered 20 minutes of the recording was mysteriously gone. In August of 1972, the Watergate scandal reached its climax with the resignation of President Nixon in the wake of impeachment in the House of Representatives. He resigned to avoid conviction by the Senate. Watergate is the biggest scandal to ever hit within the White House. The scandal threatened the basic legitimacy of the American political system. It forced Americans to second-guess their automatic trust and respect for the president, as citizens usually thought of their president as an honorable and trustworthy leader. Ever since Watergate, Americans see politicians as corrupt. On January 28, 1986, the NASA Space Shuttle Challenger exploded just 73 seconds after takeoff. This tragic disaster claimed the lives of all 7 astronauts aboard. The explosion was caused by the failure of 2 rubber O-rings due to the cold weather of the morning of the launch. This was the first incident NASA has ever experienced that had a crew on board. Prior to the explosion, the Challenger received copious amounts of media attention, especially due to the civilian school teacher joining the crew. Viewers all over the world gathered to watch the first woman and civilian go into space. After the explosion occurred, controversies regarding the takeoff arose when the public gained knowledge that the Theokoi management, the manufacturer of the Challenger, expressed deep concerns regarding the function of the O-rings in the cold weather. Eager to launch the spacecraft, NASA ignored the concern and went forth with the preparation to launch the following morning, not realizing the tragedy ahead. The Challenger symbolized not only equal rights for women, but exhibited the United States' power and future capabilities to the rest of the world. All this hope and ambition was shattered in a second that filled the hearts of all Americans with grief and shock.
The one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? That's big. How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
No, she can't say anything.
On April 30th, 1993, the World Wide Web software was made available to the public domain. A software consultant, Tim Berners-Lee, at the European Organization for Nuclear Research, CERN, made this possible by being the first to use hyperlinks to share information with other computers. The gradual development of Lee's ideas of the worldwide software was not initially accepted by his colleagues. Eventually realizing the potential for this foreign system, CERN released it to the public. The internet dramatically altered the world and how we live. It allows the growth of social, political, and economic activities all over the world. On September 11, 2001, 19 militants associated with the Islamic extremist group Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 airplanes. 2 planes were flown into the Twin Towers in New York City, a 3rd plane hit the Pentagon, and a 4th crashed into a field in Pennsylvania. Around 3,000 people were killed due to the 9/11 terrorist attacks. These attacks instilled fear and tragedy in the hearts of every American citizen. This attack triggered major U.S. initiatives to combat terrorism. Although the attack exposed the vulnerability of the U.S., it evoked patriotism and unity from every U.S. citizen. 9/11 also defined the presidency of George W. Bush. He is remembered for his prompt reaction and response to the 9/11 terrorist attack. He brought strength back to the damaged and vulnerable country.
In prayer for the people whose lives were lost here, for the workers who work here, for the families who mourn, this nation stands with the good people of New York City and New Jersey and Connecticut as we mourn the loss of thousands of our citizens. I can hear you! I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
On May 2, 2011, Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden was killed by U.S. Special Forces during a raid in Abbottabad, Pakistan. The operation took about 40 minutes total. 2 Black Hawk helicopters arrived at the compound, and Special Forces advanced into the building where bin Laden was soon killed. The killing of bin Laden was very important because it brought justice to the 9/11 attacks. He threatened the stability and peace of the United States. Also, it sent a clear message that the United States holds terrorists accountable to their actions and will stop at nothing until justice is pursued.